Fast Market, everyone. Kevin Hinks back here for the second segment of our show. Joe Mazzola has agreed to stick around for our show. I appreciate that. Now let's bring in our guest for this segment, and that is Mr. Andy Swan. He is the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Andy, welcome to the show. Happy Friday. We have a theme for today's show, Andy. It's called Sin, and this is certainly another one of those. We talked about Molson Coors in the first segment. Now we're talking about Constellation Brands. Andy, this is another one of those companies whose chart looks extremely well. And I'll ask you the same question that I asked Joe Mazzola and Alex. Is it still all about beer, Andy?
Yeah, in fact, that's what's giving Constellation Brands, really a leg up on competitors like Boston Beer Company. Some of those competitors really jumped really quickly headfirst into the hard seltzer market, and it's gotten really crowded. Hard seltzers are starting to fall out of favor or wane a little bit. The competition's intense, and so the companies that really chase that are hurting. But Constellation Brands' diverse portfolio really helped them out a lot. In fact, we're seeing Modelo is now the number 2 brand, beer brand in the United States, outpacing in terms of growth Bud Light and others. There's a real taste preference shift going on towards those Mexican type lagers. Some of that's demographic. A lot of it's just pure shift in beer drinkers' taste. And so Constellation Brands in really good shape with their lineup there. And, as a whole, we're seeing the alcohol segment, generally drift higher. I think the theme for today that you guys put together is a pretty good one. People are, overall, they kind of want to get back to leisure and a little bit of fun and relax. And, that's what we're seeing this summer. And so just overall, Constellation Brands just in a really strong spot because they didn't chase the latest, greatest thing in the hard seltzers. And, the American and global taste profile is shifting their direction, which is really interesting. Makes this one of those defensive plays that I think, could get even stronger, especially compared to peers.
Andy, I asked a question to Alex Coffey, and maybe you can back it up with some data. And it was about hard seltzer, right? It was about the rise and fall, what it appears of hard seltzer. Are you seeing any data talking about or demonstrating what we saw in terms of basically the volatility around this sector of alcohol? Because it seemed to have had its day, but it's going to the role of Zima, Andy. I think it's going away as fast as it came.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's kind of like choice. It's an overwhelming amount of choice that the customer has. There's new entrants into the market every day. It's kind of a confusing marketplace for the consumer. In fact, we see a lot of data that the consumers just kind of chase the next thing. And some of these can be private companies that spin up really quickly and have just a unique taste profile, a unique approach. I saw one the other day that was bragging about in one can, there's 2 shots of vodka. And I'm like, well, how far can this really go before we start getting ourselves into some trouble? But, I think that speaks to how desperate the market is to find a winner in that space. And, for a company like Constellation Brands to just be focused so heavily and so well on beer has really proven to be the winning move.
Andy, one more thing. I'm looking at your data, the year-over-year change, purchase intent. And Modelo being up 25%, Pacifico Corona Extra being down double digits. Now, are they all, break that down for me. Because I kind of like Pacifico, actually. That was always my favorite when I was drinking that kind of beer. I was a big fan of Pacifico. So is Modelo are they reinventing? Are they just blowing away the competition? By the way, these are all owned by Constellation, so it's a good thing if one of them is doing really well.
Yeah, it is, especially when it's their biggest one. when it's their biggest revenue driver, that's the one you want to have growing. And it up 25%. I think, another chart that we could have thrown your way would be it up, 25% or so year over year in terms of consumer demand, while Bud Light's actually negative 4% year over year, which in a growing demand for alcohol environment, that's a massive shift and that's a massive change. And it speaks to how well Constellation Brands is catching up with the dominant player in Bud Light. And they've even got this new product. I think it's called Hop Water. We got some data on that.
Yeah,
they're actually getting into the non-alcoholic space in a really cool way, a really trendy way that's catching on a lot at concerts and events. And so it just speaks again to this company's ability to not only innovate but also just really drive a very diverse portfolio of brands in the right direction.
Kind of the product mix.
All right, Andy, one more thing. You got it, Joe. Go ahead.
How important is it that Constellation has the ability to penetrate in the restaurant space as more and more people are moving towards the leisure activities, getting out and Oh, sure. Yeah, I was just asking how important is it to have the penetration for the the restaurants in terms of Constellation now that people seem to be getting up and out of their house more and more.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely important. I think they've got an enormous footprint. That's part of the reason why the hard seltzer movement kind of died off. It didn't die off completely, but it's definitely not growing like it was. And part of that was, when you were at home or meeting up with friends, hard seltzers made a lot more sense than when you're sitting at a restaurant where a lot of times all you want is a beer. And so Constellation Brands is getting all of its brands, good exposure in those restaurants, and that tailwind is helping propel the company against the competition in a really big way. So this is a company we like. It's one of those I like to just put on a watch list. If the market sells off and this gets a dip and you can catch it on a dip, good defensive name to have in a portfolio, really well-run company.
Andy Swan, thank you so much for coming on as always. Thanks for your contribution to our Sin Friday. I know I'll be contributing to that in a different way a bit later, but we appreciate you coming on Fast Market, Andy. Have a great weekend.
It's a good idea. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too.